and welcome to For a Green Future. I am your host, Joe DeMar, and for the next hour we're going to be talking about the environment, ecology, and how these things affect you, affect your family, and affect your life. But in For a Green Future, this is not your typical doom and gloom kind of environmental show. On For a Green Future, we talk about solutions. We talk about, what we can do, how we can change things to make things better and actually bring us to that green future. And we're going to hear, coming up towards the end of the show, we have an actual letter from the future. Yes, my great-great-granddaughter, Marika I, every week sends me a nice little letter from the year 2299. And, it's a pretty good letter today. I think you'll enjoy it. And she's asked me to read it all to you, so don't worry, we're not going to collapse the space-time continuum or anything, so it'll be safe to listen. One thing, though, speaking of being safe, the drive-in today, was very tricky. I drive in from Bowling Green, and as you know, Lucas County is under a level 2 snow emergency right now, so if you don't need to go out, don't go out. But I am originally from Western New York, which is has Buffalo, and is fairly famous for its snow and cold. And so for me, this really wasn't a very challenging drive-in. But, since I have the mic, I think I'm going to say a few words about driving safely in the snow. Because if you live in Western New York, you have to know how to drive safely. It's a matter of Darwinian evolution. The people who don't understand how to actually drive in the snow end up not being able to drive one way or another. They lose their car, or, they crash, they end up in ditches. So we all know, we have to know in that area how to drive. But here in Toledo, we have much milder winters. Somewhere we know how to drive in the snow, but sometimes we forget because it's been like a year or months since we've had a serious snow. So I just wanted to give people a few tips. After all, if a car crashes, all that oil and gas gets into the ground, and that's bad for the environment, not to mention bad for the occupants. So just a few tips from a guy from Buffalo, And so one of the first ones is be willing to take your foot off the gas. I mean, the biggest problem that I see around here in terms of people coping with snow and ice-covered roads is that people get overconfident. They have these huge SUVs, and they think, I've got all-weather tires. I can, that means I can go as fast as I want. And it simply physically isn't true. I mean, if you've got an SUV, that's great for you, not so great for the environment, but it does not mean you get to drive as fast as you want, no matter what the TV commercials show you. I mean, the TV commercials show people blasting through snowdrifts and driving up the sides of unpaved mountains. In real life, it doesn't work that way. Force equals mass times acceleration. And so the more mass you've got, the bigger your car, the more momentum you've got. Actually, the harder it is for you to stop. So the first tip from the guy from Western New York is be willing to take your foot off the gas. And that means, you have to get the feel for what the maximum safe speed is on the road you're on at the time. Today, coming in, the top speed I was able to get was about 45. I know the speed limit sign says 60, but I could feel starting to get above 45, things start to get a little slippery. That's the top speed for that road. Once you start to feel things going, don't go any faster than that. No matter what the sales guy told you, go the 45. And the other thing is when you're coming up to a stoplight, and there's cars stopped, give them lots and lots of room. Don't rely on your brakes to stop at an intersection, because chances are you won't, especially in weather like this, you're not going to be able to stop no matter how good your brakes are. Even if you've got wonderful anti-lock brakes, you might still just go right through that intersection. So coast up to the intersection if the light is red. Do not rely on your brakes. The main thing, the other thing is look for the tracks. If the cars ahead of you have made a track in the snow, follow those tracks. Don't try to blaze your own trail, because that's when you get in trouble. And the last thing that I wanted to tell you is, remember, you can be driving along in this weather and have a nice, clear, dry patch of road and get overconfident again, get up to 60, and then all of a sudden, here's one patch of snow and ice. Maybe somebody plowed something out from a parking lot into the road. Maybe it's a snowdrift, doesn't matter. If you hit that patch going 60, you're going to be in as much trouble as if you were on snow and ice the whole time. So watch the maximums, keep both hands on the wheel, turn off the cell phone, don't even look at your cell phone. And the thing is, you kind of have to have a Zen approach to driving in this weather. You have to be fully alert, pay complete attention at all times, but you can't be tense. Don't be gripping the wheel as hard as you can, because overcorrection can lead to an accident just as much as not catching a problem in the first place. The only accident I've ever been in Western New York, it was a day much like this one. It was way back in high school, and my sister had to get to the next town to talk to her boyfriend for some reason. I don't know why, but she insisted I drive her. We were on Route 98, which is a north-south route in Genesee County, and this truck goes by in the other direction, and I was driving this big old van, and the roads were sheer ice, and literally the suction from the truck going past in the other direction pulled my van into the opposite oncoming lane, and there were cars coming right at us. And so I spun the wheel as hard as I could to get away from those cars, and that caused me to overcorrect and spin all the way across my lane. I spun back the other way. The front end of my van hit the ground, came off the road, hit the ground. This van pirouetted 180 degrees so that we backed into a telephone pole. But by then we'd lost so much momentum, and I wasn't going too fast. It dented the bumper, but the van itself was okay. Although I'll never forget the sight of my sister lifting up out of her seat and floating across the van and going under the passenger seat, because it was one of those slow motion things. And so that's the other. Always keep your seatbelt on in this weather. So anyway, I just wanted to do a little bit of a public service there. Still a level 2 snow emergency in Lucas County, level 3 in Ottawa County. So do not go out if you don't have to. And you don't have to for the next hour, because we're going to be talking here on For a Green Future about something pretty interesting. So you can just get some hot cocoa and listen to this story. We're going to be talking about net zero houses. And you might wonder, what the heck is a net zero house? I mean, how can you have zero house? You either have a house or you don't have a house. Well, net zero houses are houses that don't put carbon in the air. Well, that's not exactly true. They can put some carbon in the air, but they offset any carbon that they put into the air by energy they put into the grid. So, for example, the simplest explanation would be a house that had so much solar on it that it produced more electricity than it needed, and so that would actually be called a carbon negative house. Now, not all houses can be carbon negative, because to offset all the energy that a house uses would take a lot of solar panels, but you can do some very simple things to minimize the carbon impact of a house. The first thing is insulation, lots and lots of insulation. And, actually they have super insulated houses that don't even need heating systems. There's so much insulation that just the body heat of the people in them keep them warm enough. That's a little more difficult in our climate, but it is possible. Another way to heat your house, I mean, right now almost all of us are heating our house with natural gas, and that gas is coming from somewhere. It's coming from the fields in southeastern Ohio, where they're doing fracking and they're doing terrible damage. We don't need to heat our houses with gas. I mean, there's one of those little sheds from the gas company in the alley behind my house, and I go there sometimes and I listen, and I can hear the millions of cubic feet of gas rushing through the pipes that are going out to the houses and keeping us warm. We have to keep warm. Being an environmentalist doesn't mean that you're willing to let yourself freeze. Not at all. But there are other ways to do it. We do not need to burn gas to keep ourselves warm, just as the generations before us didn't need to burn coal, and the generations before them didn't need to burn wood, with the correct level of technical knowledge. And we have that technical knowledge. There's a heating system called geothermal heating. And it takes advantage of the fact that no matter how cold it gets up here on the surface, no matter how cold it is in the air outside your house, dig down a little bit and the ground is 55. Dig down a little deeper, it gets even warmer. But under the ground, the temperature is constant. And so what you could do with geothermal heating is take a loop of high-density polyethylene, and you stick it in the ground, and then you run a coolant through it. And that coolant, in the summertime, it actually puts heat into the ground. And in the wintertime, like now, it takes heat out of the ground. And the Earth has a tremendous, it's called thermal mass. That's why it stays constant. That's why the Earth itself doesn't drop down to 20 below zero or heat up to 101, because it's the temperature it's at, it wants to stay at. And it takes a lot of energy to change the temperature of the planet itself. So the daily fluctuations, our weather, does not affect the temperature of the ground underneath us. So it sounds kind of like magic, because you actually get more energy out in terms of thermal energy than you put in terms of the electrical energy that you need to circulate this fluid. And the fluid could just be water with alcohol in it. You get more thermal energy out than you used electrical energy to get the heat to circulate the fluid. And it operates literally on the same principle as your refrigerator. So if you've ever, felt the back of your refrigerator, it's warm because it's taken the heat out of the inside of the refrigerator. All it's done is moved that heat from the inside to the outside. It can't create heat. It doesn't destroy heat. It just moves it around. And so you can use that same principle to heat your entire home. You take the heat out of the ground, and then you move it into your house. And yes, that cools the ground around the pipe in the wintertime. But then in the summertime, you do the exact opposite. You take the heat out of your house and you stick it into the ground. And it's a wonderful system, and it's widely used in Canada, where they have to do a lot more serious heating and cooling than we do down here. And it works great. But here, most people don't even know about it. The term geothermal heating, a lot of people don't even know what it means, and yet it's one of those simple technologies that, with no change in our quality of life, we would get us closer to a green future. And that's the theme for this show, is that we're going to get to the green future, but it doesn't mean we have to give up our lifestyle. It doesn't mean that we have to suffer to do it. All we have to do is consciously make the decision to do it. 866-240-1065. 866-240-1065 is the number to call in, and we want to hear from you. This is the best show in the Toledo region, but it gets better every time you call. And so we're gonna be talking more about what it takes to become a net zero house. I think we actually have a caller already. Hold on. She'll be with us in just a second. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, so we got the letter from the future calling up. We've got a few announcements we're going to make. One interesting thing that I wanted to mention, and I'll mention it again towards the end of the show. The federal government shutdown right now is affecting a lot of people. And so I've been asked by the Wood County Green Party to announce that they're going to be giving a free pizza dinner to federal employees or people who are affected by the federal government shutdown. It's going to be this coming Wednesday, 5:30 to 7:30, at the Trinity United Methodist Church in Bowling Green, and that's on North Court Street, right across from the courthouse. That's the building with the huge tower in the center of town. And if you are a federal employee or if you're being hurt by what's happening with the federal government shutdown, coming out, enjoy some wonderful homemade pizza, some salad and veggies and a dessert. And, it's just, we want to support our federal workers. They do amazing things for us, and most of us don't even know what's happening. So I wanted to make that announcement. I'll make it again towards the end. So anyway, the Net Zero House. We have on the line with us a wonderful woman named Leatra Harper. Hello, Leatra, are you there?
Oh, hi, Joe. Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks. And how are you doing?
Oh, I'm staying warm, and you're right. That's very important these days. And I'm looking out at the beautiful landscape here. It's Stone Ridge in Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm.
Very pretty.
Right. And you're in your home that you had built there?
Yes, I get to be home this week. I've been traveling a lot to Southeast Ohio because I do have the nonprofit called Freshwater Accountability Project.
Mm-hmm.
That started because of fracking and all the water destruction. So this is what kind of put me on this path to a more positive solution, and that's how we got to know each other, I think, as well.
Right. And so you're so your home is not right now a net zero home, but that is your eventual goal, right?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I have a lot for sale, Joe, because we did design something like that with all the triple pane windows, and we wanted to build from the ground up, and came to find out that actually, as far as environmental impact, sometimes it's much better just to take an existing structure and retrofit it so that you're not as big a carbon imprint from a new build. So started to look at that, ended up with a bigger house, a lot of retrofitting, but definitely on that path and very determined to get there. And these days it's very possible.
I think that's a really good point, that a lot of times people don't realize that if you start down the path of sustainability, that if you start trying to do the right thing for the environment, often you end up even in a better place. You end up more comfortable. In your case, you ended up with a bigger house. So it's not something people need to be afraid of. It's something we need to start. And once you start, I think you find hidden benefits that you didn't expect.
Well, actually, that's so true. I'm glad you said that, because I feel a bit guilty because it's a little bigger than I actually wanted. But then I told the movers when they asked about it, I said, yeah, but my husband's getting ready to retire, and this is probably going to increase the quality of our life when we have to live together in one place.
Right, exactly. That's an improved quality of life. That's really what we're after here. So tell us a little bit. I know. So you've got this house. You're retrofitting it, but I know that you did install solar panels.
And what was great about Stone Ridge here in Bowling Green, Joe, is that not all housing associations allow solar panels. I was kind of amazed that could have been the case, but of course, when we're here in an HOA, we had to get all that approved. So before we bought the house, we asked the Stone Ridge Homeowners Association to give us approval not only for our solar panels, but for our geothermal, and that was no problem at all. And I have to really appreciate Stone Ridge for really being on board with this.
So do you have geothermal now, or is that still in the future?
The problem is, Joe, cash flow.
Right, yeah.
There's just never enough to get there right away when you want to, but if you have a plan and work a plan, it eventually gets there, I'm, like I said, we're thinking about retirement, and some of this stuff is like a big upfront cost, but in the long run, we're not just doing it for the payback, we're doing it because we're grandparents too.
Right, and actually you'd have something you could leave to your grandchildren. We're kind of I'm getting up there a little bit in age, mid-50s. I'm not going to say exactly where, but we're looking at this retirement question, and we're thinking along similar lines to you, because it seems like you can either try to get enough money, like you can try to build a big enough pot to cover you through your retirement years, or you can cut expenses. And one of the biggest expenses for a lot of households is heating and cooling. And the thing about having a geothermal system is that your heating and cooling bills practically disappear, because you're getting all that heat and you're getting the cooling energy from the earth. You're not having to pay a fuel company to ship it into your house. And so it seems to us, because we can't control the prices of things like natural gas, it seems to us it's better actually economically, not just environmentally, but to be self-sufficient. That is, to get the heating and cooling for your home yourself and not have to try to save up enough money to pay for it into the future, because you don't know how much money you're going to need.
Well, it's not what you make, it's what you spend a lot of times. And we see as we get older maybe that some of the more important things have morphed into the long-term perspective. And it's interesting, as a grandparent, my granddaughter, when I told her that we're also going to have two Tesla power walls to have some storage and maybe have some backup if anything happens to the electrical distribution. But she's like, Mimi, are you doomsday prepping for me? I hate for young people to think in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
And she did crack me up a little bit, but it is something that is on the minds of young people as they look into the future, as it should be, because we do have to make changes that are going to be very necessary for them to have a sustainable, livable future.
Yeah, so you could tell her you're not doomsday prepping, you're doomsday preventing. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I want to do with this show, is to show people how easy it is, and how it's not really difficult to have a sustainable economy, that we can still do everything that we do now. We can heat and cool, we can feed ourselves, we can clothe ourselves, we can entertain ourselves, and it's very easy, very possible to do that without destroying the planet the way we are right now.
Well, Joe, when you look at the profiteering motive, especially with fracking, and the fact that we are in this little bubble of cheap gas right now because of the glut. But, with all the pollution, and not just the carbon footprint, but the VOCs and the hazardous air pollutants and what they're doing to our water to destroy it, and then ship it overseas to higher priced markets, we know that pretty soon this glut is going to be, they want to drive the price up, and it is predicted that the price of gas is going to go up, and then there's going to be the externalized costs that we're all going to have to pay for the environmental destruction of a short-term boom-bust industry like fracking, especially in Ohio, where we're making it cheap for them by taking their waste and processing hazardous radioactive frack waste as non-hazardous.
Oh yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people don't know, and maybe you know where this is now in the legislature, but there's actually a proposal by the incredibly short-sighted Republican-controlled legislature to allow fracking waste to be sprayed on the roads like brine. Have we managed to stop that yet, or is that still in front of the legislature?
Joe, it's being done as we speak. And this is just a way, it's called preemptive legislation, to make what should be illegal legal. And that's been done right along ever since the Halliburton loophole. We knew in Ohio that the House in 2005 was going to have to take away local control for this industry. So it's been methodical, strategic, lobbyist-directed way in which Ohio has been turned into a sacrifice zone for this industry. And this is just one of the many ways that that's happening right now.
Yeah, so people don't understand, I think, that they call it brine, what comes out of a fracking well. But it's really filled with toxic chemicals and radioactive chemicals. And so literally the fracking industry wants to spray the road in front of your house with radioactive waste.
Exactly. Well, it's being done. I mean, when you have to really, you can't believe it. And I invite people to do their own fact checking and don't rely on, mass media, corporate media, because this is not hitting their radar. And sometimes I think it's actively squashed. But in our, this rabbit hole that I've gone down to find out exactly how co-opted and actually corrupt our government has become in the hands of the fossil fuel industry, we see that we're just kind of the pawns in this whole thing, that not only would we be made sick and have to pay for that ourselves, but as taxpayers, if it's even possible to clean up this mess, we're going to be on the hook for some big bucks for sure.
Well, I don't think we're pawns, Leatra. I think that we get to define what chess piece we are. I mean, they're going to try to tell us that we're pawns, but really, we could all be, kings and queens or knights. I mean, it's up to us. Your place on the board depends on how you act. So if you're someone who does things and moves things and comes out and says what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, then you're not a pawn, no matter how they're trying to define you. On the other hand, if you're someone who just goes along with whatever you're told, you always take the easiest path. You just follow, you follow the trends without questioning them. Well, then you could end up being a pawn. But we're not, they don't get to define us, and we shouldn't define ourselves that way either, I think.
Well, and that's what we don't define ourselves as, but that's what we become unknowingly because we don't know the truth. And I believe that's why these programs like what you are doing are so very important because, I might be labeled as a radical environmentalist. I never saw myself that way. It's just that I know what I know now, and I cannot not know it, and I cannot not do what I can do myself to continue to get the truth out. But really, Joe, it's a matter of the fact that people just don't know.
I know, and thank you. Yes, that is one of the reasons that I started this program, is to let people know about the things that affect them personally and their family, that ecology and environment aren't just some thing studied in universities or just some professors on a boat, catching crayfish and studying them. That these are this is actually the study of our life, as well as ecology is the study of human life, as well as the other lives in the environment. Could you tell us, Leatra? I wanted to ask you. You mentioned, what you've learned in the rabbit hole. Could you just tell us a little bit about your first experience with the rabbit hole? What when you first actually saw that rabbit jump into the hole and decide to follow it? What prompted that?
Well, when we had our house in Southeast Ohio and we realized that a conservancy district was going to make hundreds of millions of dollars by fracking a reservoir that had been used for drinking water, and realizing that at least 2 million gallons a day of that water was going to be taken out for fracking, and then it was going to be destroyed forever and turned into a toxic waste product. That right there shot me down about 200 feet into that rabbit hole, because it's like, how could this actually be possible to do? It's not even, water was a very cheap commodity sold for a penny a gallon to this industry just to be destroyed. And this was Seneca Lake, and it was the lake I loved, and we wanted to swim in it, and they were going to frack right under it. So we just thought, well, this isn't going to be hard. We live in a conservancy district. We'll just give them the facts, and they won't do this. And then another real deep dive came when we found what people would do for the sake of money, a short-term gain. And especially when they're kind of interfacing in Columbus and all the regulatory agencies are captured, and the ODNR was all for it because our Governor Kasich is all for it. And he was not a very good governor at all. He didn't allow the necessary protections for Ohioans that he should have, and he looked the other way even though we gave him all the facts. So that was another deep dive into the rabbit hole, when you realize that even if you give your elected representatives the facts that they need to be able to do something differently, to be proactive and preemptive and use the precautionary principle, they will operate in their own self-dealing for their political motives. And actually, sometimes I think they're a little afraid of the industry piling onto them if they oppose it.
Well, that's one thing we can't afford to have is fear. I mean, I was talking at the start of the show, I don't know if you heard, but, talking about driving on icy roads. And one thing you can't be when you're actually doing it is afraid, because then you've got too much adrenaline, you're more likely to overreact, you're more likely to get in a crash. Well, it's kind of the same with environmental issues. We have to look at them honestly, but we can't look at them fearfully. I mean, we got to keep both hands on the wheel, and we've got to just very calmly but firmly do the right thing, do the necessary things to save the environment. And that's why my show is For a Green Future. We're focused on the future, on getting to that point. And I'm happy that you're taking that personal step, as well as having your nonprofit, that you're taking the personal step to get us closer to that green future. And could you just talk a little bit? I mean, I've found when I do environmental work, and I actually forgot to mention that I'm the political director of the Ohio Green Party, a political party which unfortunately has been banned by the state of Ohio because we failed to get 3% of the gubernatorial vote. But what I say on this show and my opinions are not representative of the Ohio Green Party. They're my own opinions. They also don't represent the station, WTOD. Any opinions you hear on this show are solely the opinions of the person speaking. So once you start actually doing something, though, Leatra, I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of fear and anger and frustration, but do you find, I mean, I've found that when you're actually doing something, it's the best treatment for that. It's the best cure for the feelings of frustration is action.
Well, this is where to be disempowered is to just kind of lose hope, and that's something that we just can't afford to do. But I look at things systemically, Joe, as you know, and that is kind of my background, and I see that we are doing what we can individually, and I don't want to place all the guilt upon individuals for trying to fix this. I really think that what we really have to do is dive into these issues and make a cleaner, more sustainable, renewable future a reality by voting. And it's too bad about the Green Party, but we do have some really wonderful initiatives that are starting up and seeming to gain momentum. And so I don't think that people really realize the power that they have to begin with by exercising their right to vote. I also think that we need more of a choice. We need people like you and like the Green Party. We need people that can actually offer alternatives that are more in line with what we need to do for the future. And just to, like, the Green New Deal right now is becoming, I mean, maybe you're just a little bit ahead of your time sometimes. You have to let things catch up a little bit. You can see it coming, but, you feel like Chicken Little running around with its head cut off thing, and people look at you. But I think a debilitating factor that keeps a lot of people from acting in ways that they can is that they feel guilty themselves for being users of fossil fuels. And we have to be able to tell ourselves that it's the system, because we don't have the policies and we don't have the national political will right now to do some of the things that we could really do to get this industry to take off. Whereas other countries are doing that, and they're kind of showing us the way. So I think that we can just keep developing that vision, but we have to make it a more collective vision, and we have to exercise it at the polls, and we have to have people like more people that will run on a platform that has that vision and will carry it forward and not become co-opted once they become part of that system themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that the political solution is part of the green future. It's an essential part, unfortunately, because we see the opposite of that. We see anti-environmental laws being passed regularly, laws that take us further from the green future. And so Yes, I agree. Well, that's why I'm agreeing, frankly, because
Yeah.
because I believe that. But I just wanted to thank you, Leatra, for your call, and I wanted to commend you for the work that you're doing with your nonprofit and on your house. I mean, you're walking the walk, and it's a walk that more of us have to take. And how was I just want to ask about the experience itself of having the solar panels put on your house. I mean, was that a big, huge sacrifice? Did it go quickly? What was that like, having solar panels up?
Well, our house in Grand Rapids, we had solar panels put on in 2015. And what I really appreciate, and this is the power of policy as well, is that through 2019 we still have a federal tax credit for the solar panels and the power walls and for the geothermal that we want to eventually install, hopefully by the end of this year. So those types of incentives are really very helpful. But it is also the fact that the costs have come down, and now the panels are much more lightweight, and you'll have to come over and see it right now on a sunny day. When we don't have the electrical hooked up right now, but when my husband would go out to the meter, and he would just love watching the meter run backwards. I mean, there's just something about those numbers going down that makes you feel really good about it. And I think they're beautiful, and I invite everybody to come to Stone Ridge and look at it. We are lucky we have a south-facing roof that is ideal. So I just think that it's amazing how this all fell together. But if you do have a vision and you really keep working in that direction, sometimes it seems like something else comes along to really help you put it over the top. And that's what I rely upon, because a lot of times it doesn't even seem quite feasible, but don't give it up. I mean, it's amazing. It's more feasible than a lot of people know right now.
Yeah, and it's getting, as you said, more feasible every day. The prices are coming down. The installers are getting more skilled and more, they're going up quicker. We're on the right path. All of us have to get on that path. I think that it's interesting that how you said that you've started on it, and you found you didn't even know you could do it when you started, but as you continued down the path, you found you were able to do it, and things fell into place for you. And that is a lesson we can all learn. Go ahead and get started. Start as small as you want, or as small as you can. Maybe your next car, buy a more fuel efficient car. Maybe. And I wanted to also say that Bowling Green has some. You're going to get some credit from the municipal utility, right? They're going to pay you like 6 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt that you generate above what you use. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm not really looking at that right now. I will see that in my bill. That's what's really another tangible that just kind of puts us over the top, is the first time you get to compare that. I just think that with a more long-term perspective, though, that's the real reward, I think, because right now we're dealing with a petrochemical complex on the Ohio River that it will support the frac gas industry because of the ethane, a very huge polluter. And now I'm dealing with the issue that I don't want to use plastic anymore. So, you have to really focus on what you can feel good about, what you can do, and not get overwhelmed by the huge nature of how pervasive this industry has become in our lives.
Well, and I don't know if you know, but BG is looking at a plastic bag ban, actually. So you might want to, get in on that too.
There's also we have to watch this legislature here in Ohio, because there's also a bill that's proposed to ban those bans, Joe. So the industry lobbyists try to work ahead of us to cut off our options to unhook from the industry.
Well, one thing that I think that a lot of people who are fighting for the environment, one thing we kind of lose sight of sometimes is that once a bad law is passed, the bad laws don't have to stay permanent. Bad laws can be reversed just the way good laws could be reversed. And especially a bad law as ridiculous as that one, and as ridiculous as the setback law that prevents wind turbines from being built in Ohio. These laws are not set in stone. They're written on paper and ink, or they're even more ephemeral. They're on computers, so they can be changed, and we will change them. But I have to move along here, Leatra. We have our letter from the future. My great granddaughter Marie I has sent me a letter from the year 2299. I've got to read that, and it's time now to talk about our sponsors. But I want to thank you for being on the show, Leatra. It was great.
Thanks, Joe. I can't wait to hear that letter. You take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, and when we come back from talking about sponsors, which will only take a minute or two, don't worry, won't be painful, you can call in, 866-240-1065, 866-240-1065. As I've said, this is the best show in the Toledo area, but it gets better when you call. So now it's time for us to talk about our sponsors, and very happy to talk about them. Our sponsor is DeMar Computer Consulting, which is a computer consulting company that will come to your home. You know, a lot of us have little nagging computer problems, minor things like we know we should back up, we haven't backed up, maybe even bought a terabyte drive to back up your hard drive onto, but it's like, what do I actually do to make that happen? DeMar Consulting will come to your home, and they'll help you with backups. They'll help you with installing software. They'll help you getting hardware up and running. You know, one thing that a lot of people use them for is if you buy like a new laptop, you can take the information from your old laptop and have it transferred over. And it's very easy. You just call them or text them or send them an email, and they'll come out to your home in the Toledo, Bowling Green, Northwest Ohio area. So the number is 419-973-3000, and the website is demarconsulting.com. That's DEMARE consulting.com. So give them a call today if you've got that nagging computer problem. If you tried to listen to this show on your computer and it didn't work for some reason, give them a call. They'll come out, help you with your drivers, help solve those nagging problems. So that's DeMar Consulting, DEMARE consulting.com. So, I want to talk a little bit about our website and the different ways you can contact us. Our website is joedemar4agreenfuture.org. That's JOEDEMAREFOR agreenfuture.org. And you can go there. You can find some information about this show. You can also find some information. In addition to being the talk show host, I am a writer. I have a book of short stories that you can buy right online there. Some articles and stories that I've read or that I've written you can read online. There's also a little bit of information about politics on there, since I am the political director for the Ohio Green Party. So basically the website's divided up into writing, media, and politics. And so, if you don't care about the politics, you can just look at the writing and the media. It's, I think you'll like it. Please go there, and there's ways to contact us on that website, including my email, which is joe@joedemar4agreenfuture.org. And, send me an email. Let me know how you like the show, if you have suggestions for future shows, if you have ecological or environmental questions that you've always wanted answered, I'd be happy to answer them. We're also on Twitter at For a Green Future, FUTUR, and instead of the E, the number 1. So it's at For a Green Future, number 1. We also have a podcast, which is on podomatic.com, and we're on YouTube. You can look up, if you wanted to go back and hear something again that you heard on an earlier show, you can go look on YouTube and just search for a Green Future, and we're about, the second or third thing that'll pop up. So this is our third episode, and the first 2 episodes are up on the podcast and up on the YouTube. And we're also on Facebook, For a Green Future, again. So lots of ways to contact us, lots of ways to get your questions on environmental issues answered. So let's see how we're doing here. We're doing pretty good. All right, well, now it's time for the letter from the future. This is a letter from my great-granddaughter, Marie I., and it's to be read today, January 20th, 2019. And she says, "Hey, great-grandpa, greetings from the year 2299. I just came back from the video meeting room where I was talking with your great-great-great-grandson, Matt. Matt studies bacteria like me, but he studies Martian bacteria. Yes, there are bacteria on Mars. Actually, there's two kinds, Martian and terrestrial. Back in the 20th century, you sent a couple of landers to Mars called the Viking probes. At the time, no one even knew that bacteria could live in space. So your landers were crawling with bacteria. Those bacteria have been growing on Mars now for 300 years, and they've been changing Mars every day. They're terraforming Mars, making it more like the planet Earth. Hard to believe something as tiny as a bacteria can change something as big as a planet, but you only have to look at the Earth to see that it's true. The biomass of bacteria on the planet Earth equals the biomass of all the plants on the Earth. Here in the future, we know that there's over 1 trillion different species of bacteria on Earth. In your time, they've only identified about 100,000. That's why I chose to go into bacteriology. Anyway, wanted to tell you to watch the lunar eclipse you're going to have tonight. I've seen the pictures of it that you're going to take, and they're beautiful. Even though in your time things are faded out because of so much artificial light. In our time, we know that artificial light is really a health hazard, and our streets are not lit up the way yours are. Our buildings are not kept lit all the time. We allow things to be dark when they're supposed to be dark. And all our studies show that we're much healthier because of it. And in fact, last week, my friends and I went out on the tundra and we started a bonfire because we were watching the northern lights, and it was beautiful. The sky was perfectly clear. There was no pollution as there is in your time. There was no artificial lights to hide the northern lights. And we sat with the fire at our backs and we watched the northern lights for hours. It was great. So don't worry. The future is green. You will get there. Just keep going with your show, and above all, don't give up. Thank you, Great-Grandpa. I will write next week. So, isn't that a nice letter? I think I'm going to have a very nice great-great-granddaughter. So, we've gotten through our sponsorships from DeMar Computer Consulting. Had a nice call from Leatra about putting solar panels on our house. And we'd like to hear from you. We've got time for a couple more calls. 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. And don't worry, sports is on the way. The cheap sheets. It's the next show coming up, and they're going to be in here right at 9 o'clock as scheduled. So, we're just going to be talking about environmental things a little bit longer. And one of the things I wanted to say, I mentioned this last week, and remember, last Sunday was our first snowfall. So we've had winter here in Northwest Ohio for 1 week so far. And so it's really cold right now. It was 5 when I left the house. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of global warming versus global climate change. So I call it global warming because if you look at the whole Earth, the planet Earth, it's very clear the globe is heating up, especially at the northern ice caps. NASA released a video of the ice caps over the past 20 years or so, and it's very clear that the ice caps are just dwindling away to almost nothing. So the globe is warming. But in the models and in real life, even though the globe is warming, little parts of the globe will actually get cooler. For example, the area where I was born, Western New York, is going to cool down. And why is that? Well, it's because there's going to be less ice cover on the Great Lakes. And so the Great Lakes are going to have more evaporation. And this increased evaporation is going to cool the area around them. Plus, as long as the lakes are not frozen, there can't be any. There can continue to be lake effect snow. So even though we've had a pretty mild winter here in Toledo, downwind of Lake Erie in Buffalo and Western New York, they've had tons of snow because the lake has not frozen over. The water keeps evaporating, which keeps cooling the area, and then it keeps coming back down as snow. And of course, we've talked before about how the white reflective snow sends a lot of the sun's heat back up into space as opposed to the dark ground, which would absorb it. So there are little spots on the globe where things are actually going to get cooler because of global warming. And so that's why, some people have switched over to calling it global climate change. But I think that's too confusing. That's too vague. Change can be good or bad. I'm going to continue to call it global warming because literally that's what it is. The globe is warming. But don't let people point to little areas where it's gotten colder and say, look, there's no global warming. It's actually colder in Buffalo. Well, unfortunately, that was predicted. The models, the climate models that the climate deniers jump on showed that area would get cooler. And it's exactly what's happening. So don't get confused about it. It's global warming. And yes, with global warming, parts of the globe are going to get actually colder for a little while, for about 100 years, and then that effect will go away. So 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. I'd love to hear from you. And you don't have to talk about net zero houses. You don't have to talk about global climate change or what today's topic is. Literally any ecological, environmental question you might have, any subject you want to talk about, I'd be more than happy to talk with you about it. There's some things that have been happening that I wanted to mention. I know we like to stay on the positive side here, and because it's entirely, the future is bright, the future is green, because we have the technology, we have the knowledge. Now it's just a matter of applying that knowledge. But we do have to keep going into the future with our eyes open. We can't ignore the warning signs. If you're driving in the snow the way I was this morning, if you see police lights up ahead of you, you're going to have to slow down. So you start slowing down right away. But so one of those warning lights, a study came out this week with one of those warning lights. It was a study of insects in Puerto Rico. And, Puerto Rico is a very warm climate, and it has a rainforest, a very beautiful rainforest, with all kinds of lizards and amphibians and insects. Well, a study came out this week. Unfortunately, the insect population in the Puerto Rican rainforest has crashed 90%. So the insects in Puerto Rico are almost gone, and this is terrible. A lot of people don't really get how terrible it is. In fact, I have a neighbor with a son who's like 12, and he said the other day, I wouldn't mind if all the bugs on the earth disappeared, because he doesn't like bugs. Well, unfortunately, were that to happen, all the other animals would go away too, because insects are the base of the food chain. If you like birds, and Puerto Rico has some beautiful birds, birds need insects. That's their food. So if you get rid of the insects, you get rid of the birds. And there's a concept in ecology. It's called trophic levels, and that is the amount of energy in the system. So shorthand, what it means is you need 10 times as much insect as you do whatever eats the insect. So if you have, a bird that weighs a pound, there has to be at least 10 pounds of insects in its feeding area to support it. And it's because that 10-to-1 ratio is very important, And if you have something that lives off of eating birds, you need to have 10 times as much bird as whatever that predator is. It could be an eagle. So what that means is that if you reduce the insect population even a little bit, if let's say you've got your 10 pounds of birds, of insects, you can feed this beautiful insect-catching bird. If you reduce the amount of insects by 1 pound, okay, now you've got 9 pounds of insects. That's not enough insects to support the one bird. And, of course, you get rid of that one bird, the thing that eats the bird, the eagle, that's gone too. So a small shift at the base of the food pyramid has a huge effect at the top. And in Puerto Rico, it got announced this study that there was a huge drop in the insect population in Puerto Rico, 90%. That is catastrophic. And they blame it on global warming because the high heat days, the days that are over 100 degrees, apparently what the theory is that these can actually sterilize the insects. That insects in rainforests have evolved for a very narrow range of temperatures because rainforests are usually fantastic at maintaining about the same temperature. You know, every bit of sunlight gets caught. There's plants in there that change the humidity levels. There's, you know, all these plants and animals have co-evolved so that they keep the temperature pretty constant. But if you heat the air up over 100 degrees, all those, you know, it overwhelms all those mechanisms that the plants and animals have for heating and cooling themselves, and they bake. And apparently that's what happened in Puerto Rico over the last couple of years, is they've had so many incredibly high heat days that are way off the charts, that it's 90% of the insects have gone. So just think about that. If you're turning up the thermostat on your house, the gas that you're putting in the air is contributing to the global warming that's killing the insects in Puerto Rico. I mean, we're all connected. This is a closed system. You are connected to those insects in Puerto Rico, whether you like it or not. So we all have to just recognize that connection and move towards systems that protect the insects as well as us, because ultimately their health will determine whether we get to have continued health or not, too. So, all right, we're almost out of time. Let's see. So I suppose we could possibly take one more caller, but we've got about another minute or so. And so I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you for spending this hour. It does take a certain amount of courage. It does take a certain amount of gumption, a certain amount of caring to go a little bit outside your comfort zone. You know, lay off the sports or just 1 hour out of the week. But I appreciate the fact that you've done it. I appreciate everyone who's hung on. And, you know, we got to hear from Leatra, who's a wonderful woman that I've come to admire over the years. We got to hear about the concept of net zero houses, just as comfortable, if not more comfortable, than our current houses, and yet not polluting the environment, not contributing to global warming. These things are all possible. They're feasible. We can do them, and we will do them. So I just want to leave you with that thought. Let's see. It's a beautiful sunny day out there. You know, it's cold, but it's great. Oh, and don't forget, like Marie I said, tonight is the lunar eclipse. So bundle up, lots of layers. You know, don't leave any exposed skin, but bundle up tonight and get out. Maybe get away from some street lights. Get out to where you can see the lunar eclipse, because from what I understand, it's going to be spectacular. And the sky is supposed to be clear but very cold. And thank you. Thank you again for listening to For a Green Future. I'm Joe DeMar, and we will see you back here next week.